some ways the industry squashes creativity because it wants everybody to stay in this sweet middle. It's if you're trying to please everybody, you're sunk. I play this game of what kind of restaurant would you be? And a lot of people are basically like a food court. I can do everything, whatever you want, I'll do it. And I'm like one of those restaurants where you sit down and this is the fresh fish we just caught today. And here's the fresh vegetables. And this is on the menu. And this is what we're serving. And it's going to be the best meal you've had. I'm really into this idea of narrowcasting rather than broadcasting and trying to become the biggest. Just find cool people and shoot their weddings. When I teach or when I talk to photographers, I feel like a lot of what I do is unlock them and say, you're handcuffed by these expectations of the industry, but you have the key to the handcuffs. So just let go.
Hey, welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast. I'm your host, Raymond Hatfield, and today we are chatting with celebrity wedding photographer John Dolan about creating images that are perfectly imperfect. This episode is brought to you by CloudSpot, the all-in-one, way better than Google Drive solution to deliver and even sell your photos online. You can grab your free forever CloudSpot account with 10 gigabytes of photo storage right now over at deliverphotos.com. As you can imagine, as a wedding photographer for a number of years, I've seen my share of wedding photography. But despite the number of images that I have seen, John's images stand out. And they probably wouldn't stand out maybe on Pinterest or Instagram because they're not visually trendy. In fact, John has published an entire photo book with images that he has shot from weddings called The Perfect Imperfect. And it shows us that a meaningful photo does not have to be, okay, everyone look at the camera and say cheese and very camera aware. It can be less visually perfect, but still have a depth that invites you to hang out and explore the image. His images, they have substance. That's the best way that I can describe it. And that is why he attracts wedding clients like Ben Stiller, Will Smith, Kate Bosworth, Robert Redford, Jerry Seinfeld, and Gwyneth Paltrow. These people, they are visually literate when they know what it is that they're looking at. And they can, in essence, choose anyone that they want to shoot their wedding, but they chose John for his pursuit of authentic. Even if that means authentic is less than perfect. And with that, let's go ahead and get on into today's interview with the one and only John Dolan. John, my first question for you is, I want to know, when did you first know that photography was going to play an important role in your life?
I was one of those people who's lucky to find photography early and at a crucial part of my life. When right in high school, I was a terrible student. I was always looking out the window, and then my dad bought me a camera. I kind of lobbied for a camera. I also knew that I was a collector. So I was a baseball card, coin collector, newspaper clippings, sort of historian kid. And photography is another form of collecting. So once I had the camera in my hands and got a driver's license at 16, I was just leaving school as early as I could and heading out into the world and photographing it. The power of the camera, the window into the world, that personal obsession thing was really fast with me. And I built a darkroom in my basement one weekend when my dad was away, and he was kind of shocked that I had done that, but I put all my efforts into it really fast. So it was that teenage obsession thing.
Now, you said that taking photographs is a form of collecting. Did you feel that way when you were 16 or so? Is that something that you realized later on?
I did. I had a couple people close to me die in different ways, not to get too heavy right away, but a neighbor of mine crashed his car, but I had photographs of him, and I realized that the photograph keeps this person in a certain way. And it came to me in a faster way than with most people. I didn't take it lightly. I realized when you photograph somebody, you are saving that memory. You're carving time into these little slivers. And I think that hit me in a really big way.
Man, I don't know if I ever thought about anything that deep at 16 years old. So
I was a weird kid. Yeah.
You were a weird kid. We were all weird kids. When you got that camera and you started shooting, what types of things were you shooting? Did you have any sort of focus, or it was just wherever your eye took you?
No, that's a good question, because I was thinking deep things, but I wasn't shooting anything deep. I was shooting sports and rock concerts, basically. But I realized I was really fast with my hand-eye coordination. So I was making really kind of smart sports pictures for the school newspaper. They were a little bit beyond what the requirement was. And I had that great moment when I was at a soccer game and a local newspaper person came up to me and she said, "Our photographers didn't show up today. Can we see your film afterwards?" So I went home, developed the film, and met her in a parking lot and gave her a print. And the next day it was in the newspaper. And that was that mind-blowing thing at 16 to get $25 for a print. And it was actually a really interesting photograph of three guys heading the ball into the net, and they all looked very strange and surreal. But it was a thrill to be published, especially given the fact that I was just kind of coasting through all my other classes. I realized, oh, this is something I'm better at than all the other people in my class. And rock concerts gave me that access. And in those days, it was fairly easy to sneak a camera in and get up to the front row. And rock lighting is amazing. The concert lighting is fantastic. So if you're right there really close, you can see the sweat on the guitarist's head. And it gave me that intensity of the experience rather than just being a concert goer. I was kind of part of the creative experience.
Oh, wow. Part of the creative experience. That's interesting because I feel like I've never been in a band before, a serious band, aside from anything just in high school. But it seems like to me, from the band's perspective, being out there and doing the performance, I would think is one of the least creative parts. I guess it depends on your style of creativity, but that act allowed you to feel most creative. So when they were feeling maybe one of their least creative, you felt most creative. So what did you do with those photos? Did you also share those in the paper, or were those just personal?
I think it's about being in the moment. It's sort of a cliche, but when you photograph something, you're so intensely connected with the light and the energy and the music and all that. So I was doing it mostly for myself, but then I would put it in the high school art show. But I did have an experience with a band called Little Feat, which was, I went to the concert the night that the lead singer overdosed. So my buddy and I were the only guys with cameras there. So we took our film down to the Washington Post. I grew up in the suburbs of DC. We took the film down to the Washington Post and handed it over to the old guy in the darkroom, and he ran them in the soup. And my buddy's picture got in the paper the next day, not mine. But a year later, when I was at college in Wisconsin, I got a phone call in the old days, people would put a note on your door. Dolan, the Washington Post called, here's the number. And they were doing a first anniversary story about this rock star. And they published my picture full page in the Washington Post. So that was sort of the second time where I got that rush of, this picture of yours is unique and has a power to it. So I think that was $50. I was raking it in.
I'm glad that they have a larger budget than the local newspaper there.
Yeah.
Was this still in high school?
No, I was in college then. I think I shot it the summer before going to college. And then whatever it was, a year later, they did a story about this musician.
I see. I guess I want to know, where does it transition from I'm taking photos of friends and school stuff to, you know what, I think I might turn this into a career? When did that click for you? Was it when you got that first picture published in the local newspaper? Was it when the Washington Post called you? Was it later than that? Where did it end up?
I went to a liberal arts school in Wisconsin called Beloit College. I thought of going to an art school to study photography, but my parents were strongly suggestive of liberal arts instead of a narrow path. And even some of the art schools I visited said, you're good, but you're not art school material. You might just be broader than that. And which I think was a good decision because I was interested in English and literature and things. And the professor I had at Beloit, I had for 3 years. And I think he saw my raw talent and he just took me, and it was a very small college. So he molded me very intensely over 3 years and introduced me to poetry and short stories and novels and photography history and art history and just cultural awareness, which made me go from a sports and rock photographer to whatever I became, just a deeper photographer. So I feel lucky to have gotten such a intense educational experience. And I remember distinctly the first time going on a field trip to Chicago and going to a gallery, and they gave us a special show of Ansel Adams prints, and seeing Moonrise over Hernandez in the flesh was just a remarkable experience. I was always into darkroom work, but then seeing a master print, it just raised the bar so high for me. Like, how do I go from these mediocre prints to something extraordinary?
There's so much there to go back and ask about, because what an experience that is. So when it came to this deeper education, right, being exposed to things like poetry and literature and other forms of art, I guess by this point, you already have the technical understanding of photography down. Now it's just, you learned the tool, now you're learning photography, right?
Exactly.
How do you think that learning those things, the literary, the poetry, the paintings, all of these things, how do you think that helped you in photography?
Without knowing it, I think I was becoming a narrative photographer. I think I was always drawn more towards writers than towards painters, but it just gave me this way of seeing the world, that when you walk into a room, you're creating a story. When I photograph, I'm seeing connections between people. I'm seeing little thought bubbles out of people's heads. I think what happened in college was it set me on this path that a photograph can be deeper than just the surface. The sports and rock pictures were celebrating the surface of that experience, but somehow in college, it went into the pictures. And, this is all a conversation about back in the film days. I think it's a different struggle for people right now, because I have a base idea that photography is very easy to get good at and then much harder to get really good at. So I meet a load of photographers who quit their job as a teacher or a nurse and became photographers, watched a lot of videos and learned it. And they've gotten to a certain level of technical proficiency. And then they get frustrated because they don't know what to do with that. And I think that's the real challenge. But it's a particularly unique thing to photography that you can get good at it so quickly. What other art form can you get good at in 6 months?
Right. Yeah.
Violin, poetry, sculpture. And I think it's sort of a torture of photography that you can see it. Like, you can, as we were talking about before going on, that your friends say, "Oh, you're a great photographer. You should be a photographer." It seems within reach, but it's a much more complicated struggle than you might think. But it's a worthy pursuit.
I feel like that's something that I've been trying to put into words for a long time, because you're right. I mean, you can get quote unquote good very quickly in photography, but going from good to great takes, forever. And kind of where I'm at, I stopped shooting weddings after 10 years. I kind of fell out of love with it. And I feel like now I've been trying to figure out, like, well, what do I want to shoot? And I think that for the past, I had went to school to be a cinematographer, and then I fell in love with photography after that. But because of that, I often wonder if I just focused so much on the technicals. And yeah, I can properly expose, I can look at composition, I can look at framing and lighting, and I can get the photo. And it's better than, 99% of other people.
Yeah.
But it's still just quote unquote good. It's not great. And I feel like I'm only now having the world be opened up to me of like, oh, there's so much more to photography than just this. Again, the sum of its settings, and trying to figure that out. So I appreciate you saying that. That's a hard thing. Yeah.
No, I think part of it is that the making of the picture is actually the easiest part. Taking the picture is the easy part. Mm-hmm. People obsess on it and, am I in focus? I have all the exposure right? Do I have the composition right? That's the easy part. The harder part is knowing when to photograph and what's the photograph about. I keep going back to the 3 years of photography class I had. My professor was Hungarian. He was kind of a little bit Freud, a little bit Jung and Zen. And he would just constantly ask this question of, you're saying the picture's about this, but it's about much more and you don't even know it. It was a puzzle to be the author of the picture and put things into that photograph instead of just settling for, here's a picture of two people kissing at their wedding. What's behind those relationships? And it's what's made it interesting for me for 25 plus years, that every wedding I go to is kind of this mystery to be solved. What are these two families like, and what's going to happen today? And I think it's that I'm never bored because human beings are so messy and complicated. And
Families, it's always crazy at a
oh
wedding.
my
Oh my
gosh.
gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess let's touch upon the professional side a little bit because you didn't get directly into weddings. So you went
Yeah.
into, it was commercial and editorial as
Yeah.
well. Is that right?
Yeah.
How did you transfer from that into weddings?
I moved to New York when I was 24 after a 4-month hitchhike through Europe where I just photographed every day. It was kind of my postgraduate experience.
Real
And,
quick, how many rolls of film did you bring?
not that many. I think it was probably 40 or 50 rolls.
Oh, that's
But
it.
yeah, but I was careful and I may have even rolled my own film in those days. I probably did. But I wasn't shooting a ton, but I was looking every day. That was the first time in my life that all I did was photograph and walk and hitchhike and that sort of stuff. But then I moved to New York and there's a funny thing that I just had so little skills beyond photography and to make money. So I ended up just printing in a darkroom for, say, 6 years for a few different photographers. But I was a terrible assistant. I didn't know how to light. I didn't know how to do carpentry. I didn't know how to work in an office. But in a darkroom, that was my place, my happy place. So it was a funny kind of way to spend days in New York, but
In the dark.
in the dark. And it was also a really cheap time to live in New York. I didn't make much money, but I was learning photographs from the inside out by printing people's pictures. And the person I worked for the most for 4 years was this photographer named Sylvia Plachy, whose son was the actor Adrian Brody.
Yeah.
But he was a kid when I was there. So part of my job was to take him out after school because he had lots of energy as a theatrical kid. And we'd wrestle and play football and go to horror movies and stuff. But I learned, I was kind of refining my craft. I certainly didn't know what I was photographing. I was doing some street photography. And then Sylvia recommended me to shoot a wedding. And it was just one of the great nights of photography I've ever had. A New York City wedding with super cool people. And I was just holding on for dear life sort of thing. And then I started showing my wedding pictures around to magazine editors. And they would consider me for a job at Mademoiselle magazine or Traveler or some Condé Nast, but they would say, one photo editor said, I don't have a job for you, but I'm getting married next year. And in those days, this is like the 90s in New York, it was very uncool to admit that you did weddings. So I would have a portfolio, then I'd have a few wedding pictures in it. But I ended up shooting, 10 or 20 different photo editors and writers and art directors' weddings in the late 90s. I was getting some editorial work, but nothing big. And then getting the weddings for people. And then I knew their whole families, and then I'd get assignments that way. So it was an accidentally really great marketing plan.
Oh, wow. So just because you had personal relationship with these editors,
Yeah,
and
they
knew
trusted
that
me
you
in a
had-
different way.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
And knew that you shot weddings and that you didn't shy away from it, and they didn't want to be associated with wedding photographers. Is that it? So they just knew that you would be the person?
There were very few wedding photographers in the 90s. There were, amongst my group of magazine photographers and documentary people, it was the lowest form of photography. Bar mitzvahs and weddings were just the bottom of the barrel. But the whole idea of shooting families and women under pressure, it was kind of lovely that there was very little competition. There were the old studios who shot it with RZs or the Hasselblads with a tripod and the big flash. And then there was a small group of us in the 90s. We shot with small cameras and handheld flashes, and we were sort of the young bucks.
How did you approach that first wedding? Were you trying to shoot it as you normally would your commercial stuff, or did you try to look at wedding photography to get an idea of what it was and shoot it that way?
You have to imagine a world where there was no way to see wedding photography.
Oh,
Where there were no magazines that were showing real weddings until, that was my other big break. Was I was showing my work to an agent in New York, and she said, you have wedding pictures. Martha Stewart's about to start a new wedding magazine. So that was 1995. She said, run up there because they're just about to, they're working on it right now. had a meeting there and they brought another editor in, and which is always a good sign when you're at a meeting and they bring more people into the meeting. And then they ended up running 20 of my pictures in the first Martha Stewart wedding issue.
Holy cow.
I think every wedding photographer working now should send Martha a thank you note, because that exploded the industry and made weddings cool. And it really kind of shifted because they would feature real weddings. They were using non-wedding photographers to shoot their cakes and their flowers. And they really redefined the whole genre in 2 or 3 years in the late 90s.
And you were a part of that. How cool is that?
Yeah, it was funny to go from being the least cool guy in the room to being accepted. It took me a lot of years to ever shoot for Martha Stewart Living, because that was a much more kind of controlled magazine. But I really enjoyed having that. They would just treat the pictures so beautifully. They'd make these spreads that were just incredible. So yeah, it was a lucky thing.
Yeah. I would imagine today or I guess back then, when you're used to printing your photos, it's not as, I don't want to say it's not as big of a deal as to get it in a magazine, but I guess seeing it in print is really, really something. But today, I don't think many photographers print their photos. So getting it in a publication and having an editor actually put this thing together and a designer would be quite an amazing experience. That is very cool. I have a question, because I heard you say on another interview once that your goal at a wedding is to photograph how the wedding felt and not necessarily how it looked. How do you do that?
That's the secret sauce. That's the magic.
That's why I asked.
I mean, I can't explain how I do it, except that I sort of step back and imagine. I try to sense what this moment feels like. I'm trying to get inside people's heads saying, what are they going to want to remember of this incredible night? I've always tried to figure out the recipe, but it's that I sense something and then I see it and then I frame it, or I don't know the exact order, but I do get a little quiver, like, this is incredible. Something's happening right now. How do I capture it? I've talked a lot about not controlling weddings and letting the wedding flow and just being quick to catch it. Anytime that I stop the wedding and try to control it, the picture just goes flat, because I always think of it as a sort of rushing river, and you got to just, you're in a kayak going down the rushing river, and you got to just flow with it. If you try to stop, it's just a disaster. I do little bits of leading people into good light. That's about the extent of my thing. And I'll tell people to go into neutral I don't tell people to smile or to nuzzle or whatever the prompts are. I just say, just go into neutral and don't care. And that's kind of the most useful thing. And I hate being photographed. So when I get photographed, I try to just stop posing or trying.
Yeah. I'm wondering, because that's one thing that a lot of photographers struggle with, is the posing side of it. And I think that for a number of years, the term documentary photographer was really popular because there's this connotation that there's no posing involved. You just show up and shoot it how it is.
Yeah.
And to me, it sounds like there's a little bit of both of that in what it is that you do. Let me try to formulate this question here, because there's been times where I've told people, like, just relax, just be yourselves, just, enjoy each other's company. And it's almost like when I say that, they become hyper aware of their bodies.
Yes.
Is there a way that you twist that around to get them to feel comfortable?
I think there's a theater trick of giving people a task. Anytime I see people lock up, I just say, let's go over here. Let's keep moving. But I'm shooting while we're moving to the next spot. So there's no kind of beginning or end or, okay, ready, 1, 2, 3. If I could outlaw people saying 1, 2, 3, ready, 1, 2, 3, like, why? That was 1910 when we needed to have people hold still. We're beyond that. We can handle a little bit of movement. And I just think that it's all about, what are they feeling? If they're feeling moved by the experience, if they're feeling kind of high by the moment of getting married, that should be enough to emanate off the pictures. If you need to tell people how to feel, then there's a bigger problem.
Right.
It's their wedding day. So my daughter came up with this phrase that she catches us doing sometimes when a parent will let us assign an emotion to a kid. Like, why do people tell their kids to smile, make them laugh, or do something funny? If they smile, great. But telling people to look in love or look into each other's eyes and just, so much. I just can't say any of those words to a person. It's their wedding day. I'm there to catch what they throw me.
I'm there to catch what they throw me. That's a perfect quote right there. I love that. Some of my favorite photos of my kids are, my wife is very much, she's not a photographer at all. She's a nurse. So every time she's like, hey guys, smile. And I look at those photos and you're just kind of like, this is a document. It took this photo. And she always says how much she likes my photos. And she's like, how do you get them to look like that? I'll do a similar thing. I'll say like, hey, count how many times I blink. And then they'll look like right at me in the eyes while I take the photo. Or, hey, what color is your pants? And then they'll look down because they don't know. And then they'll look up and, oh, it's blue. And there's just like that kind of natural expression. And it's playing those games that I found the same thing. And I see how at a wedding that works because there's already a lot going on. So I appreciate you sharing that, which I guess kind of brings me to my next question of like, in talking to just various wedding photographers, there seems to be kind of two camps of preparation for wedding photographers. You either want to know every moment of the day before the day even starts and how it's going to go, or you want to know nothing. You want to just show up blind and kind of let your eye take you. Where do you think you fall on that scale?
Oh yeah, just tell me where to be and when. And I like to be the easiest thing on people's lists because they have a lot of stress. But I also, linking back to the editorial work that I did parallel to the weddings all those years, a lot of times we wouldn't get shot list. We would get sort of a storyboard, which I think that's a much more useful way to think about a wedding. I'm so down on the shot lists because I think they drive a lot of photographers crazy, and I don't read much when I'm shooting, and I'm not going to, I literally see people checking off these lists.
Right.
But I think if you think of it like in cinema, a storyboard, how about a photograph that represents the place and then the characters and who's the lead and who's the minor characters and what's the drama? I have an internal storyboard in my head when I'm shooting, and that's enough. I don't need to check off, okay, sister-in-law with the aunt. Somebody else can throw in whoever wants to be photographed. I don't mind, but I'm much more interested in driving home after a wedding going, okay, did I tell a story in a full way? Did I get all the ups and downs and the sort of melancholy as well as the ecstasy? Do I have enough photographs to make this kind of tell a broad narrative? I think that's much more useful. I wish the industry would kind of embrace that and not put this pressure on photographers to get every napkin and every this and that. It's just 25 years later, you are not going to care if you have a picture of that napkin. I promise you.
I sure wouldn't care at all. And I think it can be kind of hard to communicate that sometimes because that's just what brides have seen everywhere. So that's a difficult thing. So
Yeah.
I want to ask here shortly about, I guess, not vetting your client, but like communicating what it is that you do, because what you do is not traditional, I guess, wedding photography in that sense that there's lots of details. But you had said when you're driving home, you ask yourself, did I photograph all the highs? Did I photograph all the lows? And that's something that stops a lot of people from getting into wedding photography because they're so nervous that it's just one shot that you're going to miss a moment. How do you deal with that? What if you didn't catch all the highs and didn't catch all the lows?
No one will know. That's the secret. That's
you.
the whole secret. I'm the only one who knows what I missed. I've done this for so long, and I miss people going down the aisle. I miss people coming back. I miss first kisses. I miss everything. But my mindset is always that I was much more nervous doing a corporate portrait of a CEO, which I was terrible at because that was 15 minutes, one shot, don't blow it. This is 8 hours or two. Often my weddings are 2 days. I'm going to come home with enough scenes of these two people and these two families that they're going to be overwhelmed with beautiful photographs that they're not going to look back and say, well, you didn't get a picture of Uncle Bill. Like, well, Uncle Bill was no fun to photograph, so maybe there's a photo booth. I love when photo booths are there to take that stress off.
Yeah.
But I do make it clear to people when I meet them that if you're type A perfectionist person who wants a photograph of every guest and every table and every this, there's a lot of photographers out there. I'm looking for 10 really cool couples who love photography and want the best ones say, I want one beautiful photograph from my wedding. I love those people because if they say that to me, then I'm going to work so hard to make an extraordinary photograph that I've never seen before. If I get a client who says, okay, here's my list of all the things I want, and I won't be happy unless I get them all.
You just stand up, walk away.
Yeah. Well, it's all I want to say to them is good luck in your marriage because your spouse is going to disappoint you every day.
This isn't even about wedding photography anymore.
Oh, no. It's good luck.
That's hilarious. So when it comes time to those couples who say, I just want one really good photo of our wedding, you said earlier when it comes to the preparation, you're like, just let me show up. Is there any asking them like, well, if you had to imagine what that photo looks like, what could that look like?
No,
Nothing. It's
that's
100% up to you.
But I love to meet people in person. Because I'm in New York, I'm able to, for the most part, meet people. If somebody hires me, we'll have a glass of wine and do a very relaxed engagement portrait where we'll walk around, I'll shoot a couple rolls so they'll get to see how I work and I'll get to see how they are together and who's the blinker and who's the awkward one. And those photographs are always kind of odd. And I almost want to just put them in a box for their 10th anniversary because engagement pictures are kind of forced and you're not married yet. So they're just documenting a certain moment in time. But it's really useful for me to hang out with these people. And then on the wedding day, like, there's John. We know John. We trust John. Okay, let's go. But I can't predict what that picture is going to be. And that's the thrill of it. If I could just do a template and say, okay, I'm going to deliver a picture of the two of you standing in front of the ocean. And it's just, that's boring. So I like to be thrilled.
So when it comes to the engagement sessions, and they are more of a portrait session, they're more guided, they're more posed, and you're just walking around, what is it that you're looking for? And then what is it that you're telling your couple? Do you say, hey, go stand right there, and then just neutral?
It's a very indirect thing, but it's basically just, I usually do it sort of near sunset in Lower Manhattan, and it's just, I acknowledge that it's awkward and weird, and I'm often saying to myself, like, this is a disaster. How do people do it?
It's not just me? Oh, that's so good to hear.
Yeah, no, we're all in it together. But I'm looking for something of their personality, so a picture that reflects their connection. And sometimes you'll see one or the other saying, don't do that. That looks so awkward. And I just say, there's no right or wrong. There's no expectation of you guys being in vogue. This is just a picture for your kids to discover in 25 years. So just be. And eventually they let their guard down, hopefully. But it's not a high pressure situation. It's just, let's play pictures for an hour or so.
I'm going to push a little bit deeper into this because this is really interesting to me. How do you communicate that connection between them in an image? What is it about the image that shows their connection? Obviously, there's the composition, the lighting, the framing, all those things.
No, it's that basically what I've learned all these years is that I'm a student of body language. I'm fluent in body language. And I can tell when people are forcing something, and then I can tell when they're just actually feeling it between each other. So I kind of build this, I take away expectations and then I throw them into an area of good light. And then I just say, look here, or turn. It's often just like turn your head instead of your body, or there are a lot of little dumb tricks you learn over the years, but, go to a museum and look and see how many pictures in the museum are flat towards the camera, towards the painter.
Yeah, none.
Like only old Ma and Pa in front with the pitchfork.
Oh, yeah. American Gothic.
American Gothic. Everything else is somebody's turned a little sideways and they look back. I mean, people in the old days they sat in a more elegant way. And so unless you're Wes Anderson, I think there's ways to shoot people a little less directly and and more uncontrolled and more, again, trying to feel what they're feeling. And when they have a moment of realizing this is a special couple months before the wedding, it's like, let that come out.
You've been shooting for a number of years. Do you have one wedding photo that maybe stands out above the rest that you can think of in your head?
There's one that's in my book that's very dark portrait of a bride turning to the side, and she's holding a bouquet of lilies. And it was shot with an old toy camera. Then this picture is probably 30 years old now. And it was on the context sheet when I printed it, it was really dark. So I almost missed it. And then I was just looking at it one more time and I tried a print of it and it came to life. And it's so sort of effortless and elegant. And I don't even know what it's a picture about, except that it's just a unified portrait of beauty. When I was editing my book, I had a friend who divided my pictures into truth and beauty. So she made one pile of pictures that were moments of truth and one pile that were moments of beauty. And this picture was really at the top of the beauty category because it's some ways on your wedding day, you're filled with it. You're vibrating with this energy that you may not have again. There's something unique about that day and the costume and the lighting and we're all in a play. The photographer is part of the play and the bride and groom, all the characters are part of it. And this bride in particular just played the part really beautifully.
So when you go out and shoot, had you ever thought about your images in those two buckets before?
No.
No.
Yeah, I'm grateful to my friend Holly for figuring that one out.
I love getting outside insight for
Yes.
that exact reason, for sure. It just lets you see things like, oh, I had never seen it that way, but you're absolutely right. So when you go to a wedding, now with that knowledge, do you try to shoot it half and half, or is there one way that you skew towards?
I don't know how much control I have over it, except that I can tell when I'm out of balance, when I'm making too many pretty pictures and I'm not telling enough truth. Then it feels a little, sometimes I compare it in my head to cooking. If it's too sweet or it needs a little salt, there has to be that balance. And I think in general, a lot of wedding photography has always been on the sweet side, and it's a little it's not nutritious in my book. It's not a either or thing. It's a both. And my whole mission really has been to expand the definition of wedding photography from just the pretty and the perfect to this full carnival of emotions. I mean, it's all there on a wedding day. And even on a wedding day, people go through this huge range of emotions. So why is photography so narrow? Include the complicated and the messy. I'm really excited to see younger photographers just trying to reinvent it, because we all have the same script every Saturday night, and it's really hard to reinvent. But I think it's a fun mission.
Okay. Again, I'm at a fork in the road. I can go one of two directions. I'm going to stick with this beauty and truth idea. And I think that it kind of mirrors the title of the book, which is Perfect, Imperfect, right? And it seems like perfect is the beauty side. Imperfect is the truth side.
There you go.
It's almost like a play on words, right? It's the perfect, imperfect. But is it two different things?
No, it's a puzzle. My book editor, Yolanda Cuomo, she really nailed the title. The imperfect was a phrase I've been playing with, but for me, I think when we were talking about it, I was telling her that if I'm doing a group picture, there's a perfect picture that's always kind of boring. And then there's this one picture where the people reveal themselves, and that's the perfect imperfect. It's an imperfect picture, but it's so deeper and so much richer, and you know who these people are, you know what this moment was like, because it was just that perfect moment when everybody wasn't putting on a face. So it's a super elusive thing. And when I go through the book now, almost all the pictures were one frame. It wasn't I had 12 choices of each picture. It's like that's the winning picture is this picture that rose above all the rest because it was true.
Yeah.
And the other ones were less true. They weren't fake, but they were less true. So even when I photograph my family, the best pictures, I didn't say anything to. I don't say a lot when I shoot because it's the pictures of my kids. I didn't shoot them a lot when they were little, but they didn't change when I raised the camera. I didn't have to say a word because that whatever I saw in them was existing on their face. It's the faith in what you're looking through your camera and seeing is enough.
That's a hard thing to do, to have that self-confidence, to know that it's enough.
I mean, for me, it's always this thing that the deep joy and contentment I get from making a picture where I didn't say a word is immense. So it's worth that risk because the satisfaction of making a picture in a real way is really profound.
Do you think that can only come from figuring out what this form of photography is on your own? Like you said, you hadn't really seen any images of weddings beforehand. Do you think that you just have to go in it and figure out what it is for yourself? Or do you think that you can have some sort of education and still create images that are your own later on?
When I teach or when I talk to photographers, I feel like a lot of what I do is unlock them and say, you're handcuffed by these expectations of the industry, but you have the key to the handcuffs. So just let go. I think so many people are so tight by the pressures of the industry. And in some ways, the industry squashes creativity because it wants everybody to stay in this sweet middle. But if you have a distinct way of working and a distinct clientele who you can really talk to, if you need 15 clients a year or whatever it is you need, if you're tailoring your work to find those people, then you can make really distinctive work. It's if you're trying to please everybody, you're sunk. So I play this game of what kind of restaurant would you be? And a lot of people are basically like a food court. I can do everything, whatever you want, I'll do it. And I'm like one of those restaurants where you sit down and this is the fresh fish we just caught today, and here's the fresh vegetables, and this is on the menu, and this is what we're serving. It's going to be the best meal you've had. I've been able to work this out over years, but it's not that different than when I started, that this is all I can do is shoot this way. And I can find 15 people, 20 people a year. It's not that big an ask. So I'm really into this idea of narrow casting rather than broadcasting and trying to become the biggest. Just find cool people and shoot their weddings.
Just find cool people and shoot their weddings. That's a perfect sentiment. Changing gears here recently, or I guess getting back to the wedding day itself, recently my son started selling snow cones at the local farmer's market.
Nice.
And when he was buying supplies for the snow cones, I realized that he was always making the cheapest decision, choosing the cheapest of everything, including choosing unwaxed paper cones, right? Because they were cheaper. So I tried to educate him a little bit and say, like, the idea of when making a decision, it should be good for business and good for the customer. But he was picking snow cone cups that were just good for business and not the customer. And we had this little conversation that sometimes if you buy something that is a little bit more, it's good for the customer because now they're going to want to come back next time instead of getting their snow cone soaked all the way through their clothes or whatever.
Right.
Even though it may not immediately look good for business. And the way that I'm tying this into photography and asking you a question here about my son's snow cone stand is I've also heard that when you deliver a wedding, like you do this in person, you have a box of prints, you do this and you make this an event. So can you walk me through how this meeting is good for you, good for business, and good for the customer?
When I leave a wedding, I go up to the couple, I give them a big hug. I say, I've got it. The story's over. I'm tired. My battery's dead and everything's messy now and the ties are off and it's time for me to go. And they say, go. It's been incredible. That's my last interaction with them, is this sort of high moment. So for me to send them a link 6 weeks later and them be in line at Starbucks and looking at their pictures would be such a downer, a letdown. So the idea has always been that we need to reconnect after the wedding. And I want to tell you stories of what I saw of your family. And I want to reconnect in this really special way. And it's kind of thrilling. So I meet them at my apartment or at a local place and I have the box of prints on the table, but I don't open it. And we talk about the wedding and we talk about the honeymoon and I still don't open it. And then at a certain point, I can read their body language, like, open the dang box, dude. And so it's almost like setting everybody up to love what's in the box, even though they don't know what's in the box. I don't know what's in the box really until I've shot the pictures, or I don't know what's going to be inside the box. But that unveiling is really a loving kind of revisiting of that wedding. and it's 15 pictures and everybody can do it their own way. But I found it to be really the right number for me. And then the way they look at the pictures is so rewarding to me because they're reliving that moment. And then we finish that, and then they're just full of this great feeling. And then I say, well, let's go over here. And I show them a slideshow of a top 100. And then hopefully that blows their mind. Then I give them a book with all the proofs of all the other pictures. So it's like they're overwhelmed. And then I shove them out the door and say, good luck editing. Good luck going through all these pictures. I must say it's just the sweetest thing because at its best, they say you're family now, or they say we experience something together and that connection is real. It's not a business thing. It's like you trusted me and I hope I delivered on that trust.
I know that you have a number of clients who are of a celebrity status that everybody would know of. Do you feel any pushback when you say, hey, we're going to meet together and look at your wedding photos?
Yeah, not all the celebrities have met in person, but some of them have. I mean, some really big ones. One I flew down to Washington to deliver, and that was a glorious thing. And it's more the idea of tailoring my business values to what I really think is important. So for me, to be let into people's lives is such an extraordinary thing. And I take it very seriously, becoming the family historian. And anything less than this feels to me to be really commercial. And I think of myself as more like a specialist, almost like a heart specialist. So I come in to perform this operation, and then it's like seeing the patient after the successful heart surgery or something. I'm really trying to just think of this job in a different way than we're used to with American businesses. I'm not growing my business. I don't have 20 people working for me. It's like a wedding planner will call me and say, I've got a great one for you. I say, great. What's the date? Tell me where to be, and I'll be there. I'm flipping a lot of the business models on their head, but I think it's much more sustainable than the people who grow and grow and grow and set up a studio with 5 people and albums and this and that. But the freelance life is something everybody has to figure out on their own. And this is the way I've maintained it and kept it sustainable. So I'm not a rocket ship. I've seen so many people burn out. So I'm trying to be that slow burn.
What would the metaphor for that be if it's not a rocket ship?
Just the slow train, maybe.
Mm.
I do love trains.
Trains are pretty sweet. Yeah,
I take a lot of trains, so
especially in New York, for sure. Well, John, I honestly don't know how to wrap it up any better than that. I feel like today you did a wonderful job of kind of walking everybody through the idea of how wedding photography can be different and seeing it through a different lens that most aren't aware of. So, one, I wanted to say thank you for that and how much I appreciate you. But 2, before I let you go, I want to know, our listeners want to know as well, where can we see some of your work online so that we can get an idea of what the perfect imperfect photos look like?
Well, we recently updated my website, johndolan.com. There's a blog in there that's got some interesting little non-traditional stories going on. And Instagram is kind of go in and out of Instagram, but at John Dolan Photog, where you'll see some weddings, some family stuff, some horses. We recently adopted a couple horses. Just a ridiculous thing. So they walk by every once in a while, and some sheep and stuff. Yeah, I try to mix it up a little bit.
We are in a very interesting place right now in photography and technology because, as you've seen, more AI tools become available every day, and they become easier and easier to access. And there's just naturally going to become a larger desire for things that are real, things that are authentic, things that are non-computer generated. Because here's the thing, when everybody gets inspiration from the same place, the photos on Instagram that get a ton of likes, and then they go out and try to attempt to copy that style, AI is going to be able to copy that style instantly. And because it's trendy, nobody's really going to care if it's AI because everybody's just going to move on to a new trend before anybody really could care. But what John has found is a portion of the couples getting married who will settle for nothing less than raw human emotion. And John has spent his entire career creating images full of just that. Again, even if those raw human emotions are less than pixel perfect. But as you heard, it took John years to find his voice. It took years for John to figure out the types of images that he wanted to create. It took even longer to figure out how to communicate that value that he offers to his clients. Years. But it paid off. And it only paid off because John put in the work. John did not have this meteoric rise to success. It's not a quick journey to the top. But if you want to get there, if you want to get to the top, you can have it if you want it, but you got to work for it. Right now, I want to invite you into our free and private beginner photography podcast community to share your biggest takeaway with the whole community. So if you want to grow your skills as a photographer, the best way to do that is to surround yourself with others who are just as passionate about photography as you and can provide helpful answers to your questions and even give feedback on your photos. So to join the, again, free and private beginner photography podcast community, go ahead and head over to beginnerphotopod.com/group, or you can just click the link on the homepage now. That is it for this week. Thank you again for tuning into this episode of the Beginner Photography Podcast, brought to you by CloudSpot, the easiest way to deliver and even sell your photos online. You can learn more about CloudSpot by heading over to deliverphotos.com. And remember, the more that you shoot today, the better of a photographer you will be tomorrow. Talk soon.
Thank you for listening to the Beginner Photography Podcast. If you enjoy the show, consider leaving a review in iTunes. Keep shooting, and we'll see you next week.